Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third part of this NBA podcast. Once again, we have Mo Eltahir.
Hi. Sorry, yeah, hi.
So, in the last two parts of this NBA podcast, Mo and I broke down some of the biggest deals from the trade deadline. Thank you. And then broke down this year's MVP race. So, finally, we're going to be looking at the biggest title contenders this year and predicting our champions, in addition to looking at our favorite NBA bandwagon teams. So, Mo, you want to start us off with the Eastern Conference?
Yeah, so with the Eastern Conference, I mean, the main team that I see coming out right now would be the Cavs. I mean, can't be said enough. LeBron James is, like, really, really good at basketball.
Indeed, he is.
And then, plus with the two trades that he pretty much engineered during his 2-week vacation in Miami, bringing in Timothy Mozgov, who's really been a godsend for their rim protection, in addition to Iman Shumpert and J.R. Smith, who I'm not sure what type of money he gave Phil Jackson to, trade them for nothing, but that was just really great all-around sequence of trades. So it's pulled their season out of the ashes. So
was it crazy for the Cavs to give up 2 first-round picks for Mozgov, or was that a good move?
The way you want to think about it is, instead of it being two different trades, if you think about it all as one transaction, them getting Mozgov and the players from the Knicks, the only thing they really gave up was Dion Waiters and a first-round pick. That second pick that they gave up for Mozgov was only a pick that they got from OKC in return for Waiters.
Right.
So, in reality, they gave up Dion Waiters and 1 pick for Mozgov, Iman Shumpert, and J.R. Smith. And that's a good trade any day in my book.
Especially because, in my mind, getting rid of Waiters was addition by subtraction for that team. Yeah. He just did not fit in. Trying to take 20 shots a game when you have Irving, Love, and LeBron was just not working.
Just an irrational human being. And I mean, I think the other thing is, I didn't realize how good Mozgov was going to be. When I heard they traded for Mozgov, I definitely giggled a little bit, because I was like, isn't that the guy who, Blake Griffin and all these other guys have dunked on about a bajillion times? And as it turns out, he's a great rim protector, and he's been getting a solid 8-10 points a game. So,
he's basically Verjao without the injury risk. I mean, maybe it gives you a little less on offense, but a lot more on defense.
That was definitely one of the worst GM LeBron moves. You know how they gave him $20 million with a team option for another 10? That's an awful contract.
Yeah.
I mean, with the cap going up, maybe it won't matter as much, but still, that's pretty bad to overpay for a player who hasn't played a full season in 4 or 5 years.
Right. And, I mean, bringing in Shumpert and Smith was huge. Shumpert is still a great perimeter defender.
Yeah.
Both he and Smith
decent ball handler.
Yeah, both he and Smith are incredibly athletic. We'll give you some highlights around the rim. Smith can shoot the 3. And also, something that's easy to forget, is that these were 2 of the key players on a 50-win Knicks team just a couple years ago.
I mean, that's what happens when a certain team, one man's trash and another man's treasures, is a prime example, because this team, wanted to tank, the players wanted out, and they just had too many players that were 6'6", 6'5", that they were all trying to play the same position. They weren't spacing them out, kind of like the Bucks do.
Yeah.
And so this kind of solves the dilemma for the Knicks a little bit, but I don't see how he couldn't have given up Tim Hardaway Jr. instead of Shumpert in this trade, but I guess it's great for the Cavs that they got away with this. So yeah, they're a contender for sure.
Yeah, the Hawks are looking great, but the Cavs are looking great, but let's not overlook the Hawks. The Cavs had won 20 of 24 entering their showdown with the Hawks this week, and the Hawks just thoroughly outplayed them. DeMarre Carroll's defense on LeBron James was incredible. He said he went into the game wanting to be like a gnat, like a fly, a pest, and he certainly succeeded in that.
I don't know. I think a lot of, because this is the matchup we're probably going to see at some point in the playoffs. I mean, the Wizards are imploding, so are Toronto. The Bucks aren't much of a threat.
And the Bulls lost Rose.
So, I mean, it's really down to these two teams. And I think what it's going to come down to is a little bit is Kevin Love and whether he can step up in his first playoffs ever and really seize the moment. I think Kyrie's going to be good. I think it may take him a few games to get settled into that playoff atmosphere. but I think he's going to be good.
He always seems to rise to the occasion.
Yeah, but I think it's going to be, A, whether Kevin Love can step up, and B, whether Al Horford can kind of become the star that you need him to, because the rule of thumb for most playoff things is the team with the best player ends up winning, and LeBron is not even close to best player on either of those rosters. And, I mean, as much as I think what the Atlanta Hawks are doing is going to be good for the regular season, they just don't have that type of star for when the chips are down to single-handedly pull them from the brink. I mean, they just dropped the game to Phoenix. I mean, not to Phoenix, to Philadelphia, and that kind of just epitomizes how much you need that guy who's gonna, like, when you're down, like, 14 and the team's droopy, is just gonna strap in their shoes and say, there's no way in hell we're going to lose this game. And they don't have that right now at all, and I think that's what's going to cost them in the long term.
That's true. That was a weird loss. Even though they were resting a few guys, that's not the kind of loss you like to see from a title contender. But the fact remains that they've won something like 25 of 30 games, and I think what they're doing this year has been incredible, transforming into Spurs East, their entire starting lineup, winning Player of the Month. I think it was well-deserved. 4 All-Stars.
I mean, the way that they've been playing, I mean, I'm not even sure if you can call them Spurs East. They have the best record in the NBA. At this point, we might have to start calling the Spurs the Hawks West. I mean, I think, they're definitely have to respect what they're doing, and it's definitely indicative of the direction the NBA is shifting on a macro level. But I think, in reality, the NBA champion is going to be whoever comes out of the West. And there's a litany of teams that could be that team.
That's interesting. Just to stay on the Hawks for a second, though, I mean, I don't know how many more tests they have to pass before they get taken seriously. You know, they beat the Warriors, they beat the Cavs, just night in and night out. Their ball movement is incredible. They don't have any huge interior protector, but their team defense is incredible.
Yeah.
Their bench has been good. Dennis Schroeder and Mike Scott both have been excellent for them.
Yeah, with the emoji tats.
Yes.
Mike Scott.
And Korver's having his historic shooting season, still gunning for a 50-50-90 year.
Right.
So who would you take in a Hawks-Cavs series if you had to say?
Cavs. I mean.
And how many games?
Probably 6.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Hawks might get a couple licks in here or there, but in the end, I think you might harken back to San Antonio versus the Heat matchup, and that might be a fair comparison on some level. But honestly, I think Kyrie Irving is now better than what Dwayne Wade was last season for sure. I think if Kevin Love can step it up, he can fill that Chris Bosh role, and they definitely just have a better surrounding core. I mean, J.R. Smith is a great 4th option to have, and Timothy Mozgov is a much better rim protector than the Heat had last year. Yeah. So I think if you're trying to make that comparison, I think it's a different situation. And I honestly think just LeBron I don't think he would let himself lose to another team with a starless roster.
And I mean, they have Tristan Thompson too, but don't forget Kendrick Perkins, the NBA's best player too. Yeah. So.
For sure. MVP candidate for sure. I don't know how he looked him over in the last podcast.
Absolutely. He'll probably be in the dunk contest next year too, I would say.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Hawks-Cavs I think would be an incredible series. LeBron can't just will himself to victory against a team with 5 great players on the floor at all times with incredible ball movement, with great team defense and great individual defense. DeMar Carroll is incredibly underrated defensively, but it would be hard for me to pick against LeBron in a playoff series, but I think that series would at least go to 7 games, and it does make you concerned just seeing all the parallels between the Hawks and the Spurs, who absolutely dismantled the Heat last year. Yeah. I agree with you, though. I would pick the Cavs in a close series. So let's move to the West. You said you think, no doubt, the champion is going to come out of the West?
Yeah, I mean, if you kind of like to compare what the Hawks are doing, I think the Warriors are doing that on a greater level by far. I think because they're not only doing the same system, but they're doing it in the West. Sure, the Hawks have a better record, but they're doing it against an easier schedule.
Right.
And I think in between Draymond and Harrison Barnes, all these guys are pretty good defenders, and like in the case of the Hawks, good team defense. I mean, there's no team that, like, just by any statistical indication, I mean, that's trying to, like, project who the finals favorite is by the regular season. I mean, the Warriors have gone through and checked every single, like, tick mark you could possibly ask of them. And I think they have to be considered title favorite. And even though they're the 1 seed, I feel like people don't they're like almost underrated as a finals contender. And I think that's where they're headed now. See a team that could really take that away from them. I think it would have to come down to some really bad matchups.
Yeah, and even if the Warriors do get upset, I mean, let's look at the West top 8. You've got the Warriors, Grizzlies, Rockets, Blazers, Clippers, Mavericks, Spurs, Thunder. Are any of those teams not championship contenders in your mind?
I think the Blazers, just because of what just happened to Wes Matthews,
Right. I'd agree
they're
with
probably out for the championship. And I don't think the Mavericks are good enough either. I mean, with the Rondo trade, it's kind of screwed up their whole way of playing. And if he can, come back around and really bring up his play level in the next few weeks, I mean, who knows? But right now, I think it comes down to the 6 of the Warriors, Grizzlies, Rockets, Clippers, Spurs, or Thunder.
I'm with you. Rondo's struggles in Dallas have been perplexing to me, just because Rick Carlisle usually has a gift for finding a way to communicate to players, and for working players like Rondo who have kind of an unorthodox skill set into his system. But Rondo is just an abrasive personality. He and Carlisle have not gotten along. Rondo shooting, I think, 31% from the line, which is just unbelievable. Yeah, it's been really a disastrous trade for them.
Especially just because of the connection you have with him, watching him like grow up in Boston. I mean, that guy, he probably isn't in the top half of NBA point guards right now. And it's kind of disappointing to see, especially just because, like, the Warriors kind of gave up their identity as a basketball team, which was, like, the best offensive basketball team. They were on pace to be the best offensive basketball team in history, and they just moved the ball around really well, and they've kind of given that up to bring in that type of star who may be able to D up other point guards, but now it's kind of looking like a mistake, and they've shipped off Brandon Wright, who was kind of integral to their bench, and now they just kind of have, like, Charlie Villanueva. They just signed Amare Stoudemire, so I mean, you can tell that they're kind of in dire straits.
Absolutely. So, behind the Warriors, then, who do you think is the one team that could knock them off?
Honestly, I think if I was to pick, I would say the Clippers, just because of their very recent form. I mean, if you look historically at some of the Doc Rivers teams, a lot of those teams started off maybe slow, but then they really pick up as the season, at the end of the season, and then they go on like some really good playoff runs. And that's what it looks like it's happening with the Clippers. They've been 6-3 without Griffin the last 9 games, pretty much since the All-Star break. And they've been doing really well against Western Conference opponents. Since in the new year, 2015, they've only lost 1 game to a team that was in the playoffs from the Western Conference.
Wow.
So I think they may drop the miscellaneous game to like a middling Eastern Conference team here or there, but I think when they really have their eyes on the prize, they can focus in and do really well. I mean, DeAndre Jordan has just been
unbelievable.
Beast. I mean,
unbelievable.
Doc Rivers made like the comparison to Bill Russell, and people laughed him out of the room. But right now, he's kind of doing a lot of like weird Bill Russell things.
Plus the similar goatee.
Yeah. Like, I don't know, just defending really well, like more than a few 20-20 games. He's having 16-20, 18-20 games.
He's averaging 17 points a game too since Griffin went out.
Yeah,
and I think the lowest number of rebounds, Jordan just wrote about this in an article for the blog today, the lowest number of rebounds he's had in the last 10 games is 15. The lowest number of rebounds in the last 10 games.
I mean,
unbelievable.
He's been doing really great. I mean, all season, and it's just this stretch has further highlighted it. And when Blake Griffin comes back, I mean, watch out, because not only are they already really great with what Chris Paul has been able to do, but just Blake Griffin is also very, very good. I mean, he's putting up 5 assists, and he's also has 7.5 rebounds. His rebounds have been down because, I mean, with the jump shooting that he's been doing this season, because Jordan's in the paint a lot, and B, because he doesn't need to rebound when Jordan's grabbing 15 a game. I mean, it's just it's unnecessary. And so
he can focus on distributing, which he's great at.
And he's been having one of the best all-time passing seasons for a big man, and he's been getting those 5 assists a game, which no player has dropped 23, 7, and 5 in the last 10 years besides LeBron. Him and LeBron. So, I mean, it's definitely indicative of how great of a season he's been having. And I think with that core, I mean, it's a legitimate big three now, and they could go far.
Yeah. Also, Jamal Crawford, reigning sixth man of the year, just went down with injury. But they signed Nate Robinson to a 10-day contract to fill in for him, which I love. Doc Rivers coached Robinson in Boston. He's an electrifying player to watch.
He's a good player. I don't know. I think he's actually kind of above of having a 10-day contract. It's kind of a bit confusing to me as to why he wasn't immediately picked up after the Nuggets dropped him. But yeah, I think the Clippers are going to hold on to him. Not to mention J.J. Redick has been having a quietly good season. Every once in a while, if the Clippers are having a down game, he'll actually drag them out from under, and he can have some of those 25 games. So he'll never, and J.J. Redick is one of those players who will never lose you a game, but I think he could definitely win you a game.
I'm with you. I mean, Jordan has been incredible, and if you have Crawford and Griffin coming back from injury right before the playoffs, they'll be revitalized, and they'll have kind of a renewed energy that I think the Clippers have lacked in the playoffs the last couple of years. Let's take a look at some of these other contenders from the West. We talked about James Harden and how he's elevated the Rockets in that MVP podcast, but what about the Grizzlies? We haven't touched upon them at all.
I'm gonna all cards on the table. The Grizzlies are not a team that I passionately follow, but I think the Grizzlies, they obviously have a great core, and I think one thing is with now that Jeff Green's come along, even though he hasn't been putting up the greatest numbers, I think his scoring is still above 15 points a game since he moved to the Grizzlies. I mean, whatever he's done for their roster in terms of completing it and defensively, they've been pretty much on a winning tear since he came on board, and I think they're looking like one of those teams that could really get at the Warriors if Andrew Bogut goes out again. I mean, they might not have a defense.
Well, that would be huge.
They might not have it as he has before in the past.
Yeah.
I don't think they would really have a defense for the Grizzlies' really tough front line.
I think the Grizzlies really deserve more attention. I mean, Mike Conley, in a league filled with great point guards, not all of them are going to get their due, but he is completely overshadowed in the West. He's an outstanding point guard. Tony Allen, great perimeter defender. Courtney Lee, excellent wing, one of the best 3-point shooters in the league.
I think he's a ridiculous early season. Him and Maurice Spates were a couple of those guys who were just started off with a bang. I mean, I think it's quieted down a little bit, but Courtney Lee's
I still think he's in the top 3 or top 5 in the league in 3-point shooting. And then you have the two-headed monster in the front court of Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol.
Yeah.
Gasol is, he's not going to win MVP, but he's been referenced as a candidate, which I don't disagree with.
Yeah, he's a good passing big again, and him paired with the Zebo. I mean, that in the same way that no point guard wants to play against Russell Westbrook, no big man wants to spend a whole 48 minutes banging down low with Zach and Mark. So.
And also, the Grizzlies are a team that's consistently stepped it up in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Taking it to 7 games against the Thunder in the first round in that incredible series before Randolph was suspended for Game 7. They easily could have taken them down.
Yeah.
And they've never had an incredible regular season like this. So I think they're really a team to watch heading into the playoffs.
Yeah. I think with the Rockets, it's going to hinge on Dwight Howard's availability. He's been having quote-unquote knee issues on and off during the year. It's caused him to miss 20 games so far. But also, I think the other thing is last year was an interesting phenomenon. They lost in the first round because they went up against the Trailblazers, and all of a sudden, all those calls that Harden was getting that allows him to score 40 points with only maybe 18 shots, they all evaporated, and he was left with little game. And I think now that they've tightened things up defensively, that'll definitely help them get through a first round. But I think if they don't get the calls, they might be an easier out than people think.
Yeah. And Harden does have history, albeit sort of in a small sample size, of struggling in the postseason. He was just absolutely terrible in that Thunder Heat series. in the finals. And the playoffs are called differently. In the NBA, it's a different kind of game. It slows down a lot more. I do think Harden will get more respect from the refs, though, with the kind of season he's had. I think that he'll still get some of the calls he gets in the regular season, but that is something to keep an eye on. How about the Spurs? Are they done?
I mean, I don't think they're done per se. I think they'll be a tough out, but I don't think that they are the contender this year. I mean, the Spurs just historically have never been able to win back-to-back. This season's had a lot of weird stuff going on. I think everyone's a year older, which, I mean, is the perennial argument that never holds up. But it looks like it kind of really caught up to them this season because they're not contending for the number 1 seed. They're just kind of lingering in the 6th or 7th. And right now, Tony Parker has been not having a great season. Kawhi hasn't had quite the breakout that everyone wanted him to have.
And has been injured a lot.
Yeah, he started off the season injured for a large stretch. So, I mean, I just don't know. I don't think with his slow start, I'm not sure if Kawhi can come into that alpha dog role that people were expecting, and quite frankly, that the Spurs needed him to come into this year for them to be a really successful playoff team. So, I mean, as with any of these teams, even the ones that we don't think are going to contend, they're going to be a tough out for sure, but I don't think they're a contender.
Parker's really important to watch. His numbers have been dropping off the last few years, but it's been a precipitous drop-off this year in particular. This will be a little out of date when this podcast is put up, but the Spurs just played the Bulls today and won, and Parker dropped 32. So it'll be important to keep an eye on whether he can continue to be a more consistent scorer for them going into the playoffs. But Tim Duncan is incredible.
Doing it.
When you get a chance, go on basketballreference.com, look up Tim Duncan, and look at his per 36-minute numbers for his career. Exactly the same every season. 20 points, 10 to 12 rebounds, a couple blocks every single season. There's just absolutely no drop off. I don't know how he does it. Maybe it's because he runs so slowly that he's just been able to conserve energy so much, only playing into his 60s or whatever, but he's unbelievable.
I think that's part of his game. I mean, he doesn't predicate too much stuff on kind of being too much of a athletic beast. Yeah, he didn't in his early days, and he doesn't now. And for those reasons, he's been able to, just by keeping in shape to a relative amount and taking it easy and resting a lot of games, he's been able to carry over that same game, the old man's game per se, and quite literally now. But I think it's definitely an amazing story, and just it's really been nice to watch.
All right, and finally, what about the Thunder? I mean, they're only a half game ahead of the Pelicans for the last playoff spot right now. It remains to be seen whether Durant will return to full strength this season. That Jones fracture has been really bothering him.
Same foot. He got injured on the same foot again, and it's kind of now looks like it might become a problem.
But let's say that Durant comes back. Now they've got Waiters, who's a capable scorer off the bench, even though he's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
They've got Enes Kanter, DJ Augustine, Kyle
He's just
Singler.
like a new age Charles Barkley. I mean, it kind of makes you wonder why Utah traded him away for so little. I mean, I understand that you want to develop Gobert, who's been a great rim protector this year, but then you come back and you see Enes Kanter dropping 20 in 10 games, and it looks like he's kind of enjoying himself on this new team. It's gonna create
not quite the same body type as Barkley, but
you should have seen the early games. You would think that what's his name, Kanter thought he was a 3-and-D guy for the Utah Jazz. He was really popping it early in the season until they told him to tone it down.
But let's just say that Durant's foot, he's taking his time to recover. His foot is totally fine. They keep the 8th seed, and Durant comes back totally healthy for the playoffs. This is by far the deepest Thunder team we've seen in the Durant Westbrook
and
era.
It would be, I think, the only thing that could really limit the Warriors Thunder from being one of the best series of the 21st century that we've seen, especially in the first round, would probably be Scott Brooks making some less than astute calls. But I think otherwise, I mean, if I were the Warriors, I would start looking at my schedule and seeing what games I could reasonably try to drop at this point, just because I think you don't want that problem that early in the playoffs, especially given who you're gonna have to face in round 2 and round 3 if you make it. I mean, as well as the Warriors have been, and as good as Steph Curry's been, the team with the best player usually wins the playoff series. And I'm sorry to Steph Curry, all respect, but that's Kevin Durant. And I think if I was them, I'd start looking to see if I can drop off and kind of hand this matchup over to the Grizzlies,
Wow.
who have actually had a decent record of been able to go up against the Thunder. So
yeah,
I don't know.
I think that if the Thunder had fired Scott Brooks once Westbrook came aboard, they'd have at least one title by now. You look at their offense, and it's just entirely reliant on Westbrook and Durant doing crazy things that no one else can do. There's no ball movement. It's constant ISOs, constant driving kicks. The plays look impressive because Westbrook and Durant are unbelievable players, but what would these guys be able to do in, a Spurs, Warriors, Hawks kind of system?
Right. I mean, that's definitely one thing, and I think as much as you can say that, a lot of the stuff that, there are different types of coaches in the NBA, and I definitely think what Scott Brooks has been able to do is, who knows what Russell and James and Serge and Kevin would have become had Scott Brooks not been the coach. I definitely think he's one of those coaches that's definitely strength lies more in the sorry, I'm having
no worries.
Brain cramp, but developmental part of the game. I mean, he's been able to turn each and every one of these players into a serviceable star or a superstar in the NBA.
That's a fair point.
And I think if he's able to keep that locker room together and keep these guys motivated and they play hard for him and they truly believe in him, then maybe he's the right coach for that team.
That's a fair point.
And I think if you look at some of the early OKC rosters, just the way it was constructed, this is the first real deep roster they've ever had.
Right.
And I think maybe with those other rosters, maybe that's what you needed. Maybe you needed 20 different KD and Russell Westbrook ISOs. Definitely could have been managed better. Not saying it couldn't have, but I think maybe that's what was best for the team at that given moment, just because who are you going to kick it out to? Andre Roberson? It's not fooling anybody.
Right.
I don't know.
All right, so what is your finals pick?
I'm going to stay with the Cavs out east, and then
it's so tough.
Just Warriors. I would have to Cavs Warriors, just because, I mean, you've never seen it, historically, I think it would, they're first in defensive efficiency and first in defensive and first in offensive, right? At certain points in this season. Mm-hmm. I don't think you've ever seen a team do that and not win the title, let alone get to the finals. So I think early pick, I'd have to still put, as much as it breaks my heart, put the Warriors in there and put the Cavs up against them.
And you take the Warriors?
I would take the Warriors, yeah.
The Warriors, if they maintain it, they're a little behind the Clippers in offensive efficiency right now, but if they finish top in offensive and defensive efficiency, the only other team to do that would be Jordan's 72-10 Bulls.
Right,
so
yes.
It's a rare feat. I am going with the same matchup, Cavs Warriors, but I'm going to go Cavs over Warriors. That's my pick. I think that the Cavs have been a different team with Mozgov, Smith, and Shumpert, and I think that the playoffs is just a perfect scenario for LeBron and his skill set, so I will take the Cavs this year.
Mark, we can cut this, but do you remember, I might have come to you 2 months ago, and I was like, you know what, I think the Cavs could take the Warriors in a series. And it kind of sounded kind of crazy, but I think that's 100% a valid thing. I think, I mean, especially watching some of the amazing defense that LeBron plays, he probably doesn't get enough credit. I think somewhere down the line he should have won Defensive Player of the Year, but he can just lock players in a box. And I think if they stick him on Curry and they take away Curry, I think what's his name, Klay Thompson is great, but I think he's only really truly great when he's a second option and the other team is double teaming Curry.
Right.
And so I think if they can take away Curry, then I think it starts to all crumble down, no matter how good of a coach Kerr is perceived to be. I don't know.
All right, so that wraps up our discussion of the title contenders, but the final part of this podcast, we're going to talk about our favorite bandwagon teams. So here's what we mean by this. Here's the scenario. Let's just say, hypothetically, that your favorite NBA team was uprooted and moved to Seattle to become the next Sonics, or just eliminated from the league, and you had to pick another team to follow and root for the next 5 to 10 years.
This is who you ride with for the future. And for my pick, I'm taking it down, not to South Beach, but to Orlando for my Magic. I mean, this is just one of the all-time, in my opinion, fun teams. You can look up Victor Oladipo, R&B. There are some great videos. He can sing pretty well.
Including in the dunk contest,
yeah. Alfred Payton with the Weekend style hair. They've got Aaron Gordon tweeting out that he's lonely and that some people should come over to his apartment. This is just a great team, and that's just on the non-basketball side. If you look at it right now, he started kind of a delayed season, but Oladipo's been playing something like 17, 3, and 4 this season. He's been doing just amazing defensive things. He's super athletic. Next season, I'd be surprised if he didn't go 25-5 and make the All-Star game. Alfred's a great defensive prospect. He plays hard. He's smart. That's what happens when you spend a few years in college, as Oladipo also did. And I think he'll be able to evolve into that Rondo type, kind of very, he's got it in terms of the passing, and I think he can turn into, a triple-double threat every night type of player who won't ever be a great shooter, but that won't matter as much. I think he'll get you 10 and 12.
Plus, neither he nor Rondo can shoot any free throws, so that's a good comparison.
And then I think one player who hasn't been getting as much shine, which is fairly surprising because he was the 4th pick in the draft this year, but Aaron Gordon, if you just watch videos of him in a high school or college, or even some videos from the NBA right now, this guy, he is liable throughout his career later on to become one of those Russell Westbrook, Kenneth Faried types that just goes hard every single play. And I think it's really exciting to see not only that, but they have great young bench wings, Mo Harkless, Andrew Nicholson, Tobias Harris. I hadn't even talked about Tobias Harris and Nikola
He's only
Vucevic.
23, 24, Harris.
Harris. They grabbed those in what was the Dwight Howard trade debacle. They robbed Nikola Vucevic from the 76ers, who's kind of an all-star snub, 19 and 11, not as great of a defender, but that can be solved with a good coach. And then, to cap it off all, Tobias Harris, who might leave this summer. He's a restricted free agent, and he's been 18 and 8 for the greater part of the season as a small forward, which is just crazy. This is a team that, had they had a good coach this year, I don't see why they wouldn't be the 6th seed along with the Bucks in the playoffs. One, just as a closing thing, because I've been on this diatribe for maybe 2 minutes now. I think that the number one coach who I would like to come in and develop these guys is Mark Jackson. That guy doesn't get nearly enough shine. Steve Kerr came in and the Warriors started doing amazing. I don't want to take anything away from him. Actually, I do want to take something away from him. I think he gets too much credit. I think people like to bash Mark Jackson because maybe he doesn't gel with the analytics side of things, or maybe just because he's an abrasive personality. But I think Mark Jackson did some amazing stuff in bringing Draymond Green, in bringing Harrison Barnes, in bringing Steph Curry and Klay Thompson. You ask any of those guys, and they're all like, yeah, I wouldn't be who I am without Mark. And in that playoff series that they lost against the Clippers, they were playing harder than the Clippers because they were playing for Mark. And I think if you could bring that sort of energy to the Orlando job, I think the sky's the limit for what these players can become. And they're going to get another mid-lottery draft pick. And I just think that these guys could be fairly insane. Also look out for them as a kind of crazy blockbuster trade type thing, because Orlando is actually a decent free agent destination with no state income tax.
Right. Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well. After Jack Vaughn was fired this year, you'd hope they can get a good leader for this team, but I think Jackson would be an excellent choice. My choice for my bandwagon team is going to be the Timberwolves.
Yeah.
Andrew Wiggins is going to be the near unanimous Rookie of the Year, should be the unanimous Rookie of the Year. he's been very impressive. I had a ton of doubts about Wiggins entering this year, given all of his struggles at Kansas as a freshman, but he showed a really polished offensive game, a much better shooter than people expected, finishing around the rim, alley-oops from Rubio. But also a very impressive post game. He's been able to bully.
He can really back people up. I mean, and then he's just kind of beautiful to watch, just gliding through the air for those very marquee, that's like, it's kind of like Dr. J-esque, I even want to say, the way he just kind of glides laterally. It's just really something beautiful. But continue.
And then, Wiggins is just the start. They have a bunch of other great young prospects. Levine, the dunk contest winner, an absolute freak athlete. Rubio, who's still young, although he's played less than 20 games this year, I believe.
Yeah.
But, a great passer to go alongside Wiggins, and Levine can lob to them all day. Anthony Bennett, who, you shouldn't
give him one more season to prove himself.
Exactly. You shouldn't write off a number one pick too quickly.
Yeah.
There should be some reason, supposedly, that the Cavs picked him number one overall.
I think it was kind of, it's unfair to him that we all view him through the scope of a number one pick, because, if you harken back to that draft, everyone was their minds were blown that they picked Anthony Bennett. I actually really liked him going into that draft, but obviously he had he had a bad opening season. Put it in layman's terms, he was fat. He just showed up fat for the first season.
Asthmatic too.
Yeah, asthmatic, and he claimed he had some eye problems. Whatever he wants to say to the media, but not to mention one of their guys who's picked in the same draft as Anthony Bennett, Shabazz Muhammad, just really come back.
He's really come on this year. Absolutely. He's proved a lot of doubters wrong this year. A lot of double doubles, flirting with 20 points. Pretty frequently. So, and then you've got Gorgie Jang, who's a great, I probably mispronounced that, but who is a great, promising young big man. You've got a few other sort of fringe prospects who. You never know. Maybe one of them will develop into a good role player. Glenn Robinson III, Robbie Hummel, and Adrian Payne, who was getting no minutes with the Hawks and is getting a second chance in Minnesota, and who I think is a promising stretch four. Great rebounder, but can also stroke the three. And then all of these young guys are getting mentored by KG this year, which I think will do wonders for them. So, yes, they have some sort of leftover players like Pekovic and Kevin Martin who they got with the intent of going for a playoff seed. But I think that once they shed some of those contracts, continue to grab some young players, and who knows, maybe even attract a free agent, I think this will be a very, very fun team to watch, especially as Wiggins develops.
Yeah, for sure.
So there you have it, our full breakdown of this year's insane NBA title race and our favorite bandwagon teams to watch over the next 5 to 10 years. And that will conclude our 3 NBA podcasts. Thank you very much for listening, and we should have more on the NBA as the playoffs approach.
All right, peace.